belief of having your own home is an actual asset was false. Instead of putting large deposits to control these assets, it's pretty much done for and over. We believe that we need to save, 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 and then you buy something because you now own something on a piece of paper, and then you wait for financial independence. Financial independence doesn't mean you need to become a millionaire to be able to be financially free, right? So the reason why when I say to people that if the first property you're gonna buy is your own home, there's a financial trap. And I will explain why. So I moved to the UK from Brazil at the age of 19. Absolutely broke, didn't speak a word of English, didn't have any money, didn't know any people, and it was absolutely hard. But my belief was that I have to own my own home, right? And I worked so hard for it, and that's how the drive for working for promotions after promotions pretty much came from. And then years later, I realized when I had it, I realized that the dream and the belief of having your own home is an actual asset was false, because an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money away from your pocket. So, and what I learned from that was I was actually then trapped into a place, taking money out of my pocket, and was not the asset I was taught or believed to accept as truth, right? And eventually what I discovered was that I have put so much effort into something that was actually sucking a lot of cash out instead of putting money in my bank account. Now, over the years, I have gone through many challenges in different ways, and I have learned the lessons of how to generate cash flow and equity from assets, which sometimes you don't even need to buy them. And that's one of the things I do through real estate. So I use real estate as a vehicle to generate cash flow and equity. And for most of them, it's actually before I even buy them, okay? There's a much smarter way to do that. And I will explain on this video today why buying your first home for you to live in is actually a myth. And it's kind of like a false belief from childhood that we were taught or conditioned that you need to own your own home to prove success, or whatever the definition is. So what is the traditional way that most people do today? And so people go and work so hard, they work for somebody else, and they want promotions at work because they want to earn more and have a better lifestyle, which is cool, it's fine. That's what we all want, right? For ourselves and our families. And most people, if you are like me, when I grew up, I was taught to believe that I have to work so hard, save, go and put a deposit and go and buy a house. Now, there's some truth in that, but not necessarily the first house for you to live in. And the reason is this: when you go and work for somebody else, you work hard, and you save what I call post-tax money. So you earn your wage. Most countries around the world, of course, the countries where you pay tax, which is most countries around the world, you then work so hard and you pay your taxes, and you have what I call post-tax money. So you then save that money to go and put as a deposit into a house. If you are buying your first home with that, then you are not buying an asset, you then buy a liability, because that money you have saved so hard, you put into an asset that's not going to generate income. Now, if it's a rental property, it's a slightly different story, and we're going to cover here in this video today. Now, that's the traditional rule, right? We save some money, whether it's 5% deposit, 10% deposit, 15, 20%, whatever the amount of the deposit is. That's usually how it is. But that can actually slow you down. And a really good tip on that is this: if you have a lump sum of cash, you would want to employ that cash into income generating assets or products or vehicles, which will give you the cash flow and ideally also build your equity. That's a wise investment to make, not necessarily to park cash into your own home or things that will give you very little every month that you're not going to even be able to leverage enough to be able to build enough profit to then build for the next deposit or potentially to scale. Okay, that's the most common trap that most people around the world find themselves in when they start buying real estate. Now, why that rule is a trap? So what happens is when you buy a house, right, that often ties up your money and doesn't give you any income, as we have discussed here a minute ago. Now, it can also limit your freedom and can also limit what you can do with your life. Nowadays, everything is based on technology. There's no more, I remember back in the days, traveling from the west to the east was just such a big thing, and people to do business with the west or the east or Middle East or Africa, Americas, it used to be such a big thing. Nowadays, there's no barriers anymore, so you can pretty much be on the other side of the world in a maximum period of 24 hours. Now, work is changing. How we do business is also changing. And when you actually create roots in a place, I'm not saying don't create roots, it's not the point here of this video, but it's about raising your level of awareness about employ your money into a first time buyer house, right? Because that's the belief I had, that's the trap I went into, and that's what held me back so much for so long, because I had to keep working for other people for much longer until I had a life situation where I had to create a new way of generating cash flow and equity there. Now, what I do instead perhaps will give you more value to you watching this video today. So I focus on controlling assets, okay? I do acquisitions. I consult to companies to whether they are real estate in different areas or whatever there is, but there's acquisitions involved in what I do. But what I do with most of my time is actually controlling assets and what it means. So you control an asset instead of buying it today. So you don't have the whole bureaucracy of going through conveyancing, lawyers, solicitors, stamp duties, and the long process, which sometimes, especially in the UK, can take up to 8 to 12 months to acquire, to do the place up, to make it look really nice and get it cash flowing. So what I do usually is I control assets which have a specific potential for further development down the road. But instead of putting large deposits to control these assets, it's pretty much done for no money, right? There's a strategy there that I use. So control the assets for a number of years, and during that period, I still generate the cash flow, and I'm also building equity on an asset which is under somebody else's name for a long period of time until I go and strategically complete the transaction a few years later. But during that period, I have built cash flow, I have built equity in there, and in some cases, depending on how the actual property acquisition is done, you can actually use the funds from the property itself to generate enough equity and cash flow to then acquire it, okay? So what happens with that is it creates cash flow for a long period of time, which is a predictable type of cash flow. And these properties are rented out and can be rented out in a strategic way where you will achieve substantial amounts of cash flow. The traditional property today, traditional house today in the United Kingdom, for example, you can generate traditionally anything between 200 and 600 a month of net profit. Now, the problem with that is this. There's not, we haven't even deducted maintenance, taxes, and unexpected issues which could take money out of those few hundreds a month, which could potentially leave the person with just maybe a couple of thousands at the end of the year. Now, there's a way that you can strategically control assets so you don't need to put a deposit to earn that little cash flow every month, but then instead you rent it out in a strategic way, usually to corporations and a few other ways, where we're looking at net profits of 1,500, 2,500, 3,500 per month per property, even without having to buy it. So that helps me to scale fast, and that's something I've been doing for quite some time. Now, the smarter rule I want to share here for fathers is only get involved with properties that will generate substantial amounts of cash flow from the get-go. And the reason this is really important is that a lot of people, again, from belief systems, from upbringing, from childhood conditioning or whatever, we believe that we need to save, and then you buy something because you now own something on a piece of paper, and then you wait for prices to go up, and then eventually you have something in the future. Now, is it guaranteed that prices will go up? Well, in most countries it will, but it's not guaranteed, right? We don't know how the economy is going to perform, we don't know how the demand and supply is going to be, and all these things. So what you want to do is to get involved with kinds of assets which generate substantial amounts of cash flow from the get-go. And especially if you don't have to put your money down to control it, right? Rather you're gonna buy it or control it, you want to control. How you control makes no difference. It's just that belief system like I had from childhood, my upbringing, my parents, my surroundings, my relatives, they all believed that to have control over an asset, you need to buy it. And reality is you don't. There are ways of doing that. And the advantage of generating substantial amounts of cash flow from assets they have not even bought yet is to help you scale. Because what you don't want to happen either is to work so hard, and then you put all these post-tax saved money into a little asset that's going to give you only a few hundred every month, and then it's not enough to get your momentum, to build momentum. I hope this is making sense. And then what's going to happen is you're going to rely on your employment to be saving money to then do the second time, and then repeat the cycle again, the third time, the fourth time, the fifth, the sixth, whatever time you can do that in your lifetime. But then you're going to end up working for somebody else for very, very long periods of time, and probably working so hard to have a few assets there, which doesn't really generate any kind of decent cash flow to give you the freedom that you want, okay? And financial freedom, it's not necessarily becoming a millionaire, because you don't need to become a millionaire to become financially independent. What you need is to generate enough cash flow that can replace your income today if you're still working for somebody else, or generate enough cash flow that you don't need to exchange your time for money and you still have a good lifestyle. That is the beginning of financial independence. Financial independence doesn't mean you need to become a millionaire to be able to be financially free, right? A lot of people think that you need to have multi-mega million pound or dollars or euros to be able to become financially free. Well, that's great when you get to that stage, but to start with, you don't. You just need to generate enough cash flow or income from sources that you don't need to exchange your time for money, and there's enough in there to sustain your lifestyle. Now, one of the things I do, which I share very openly in everything I do in terms of videos or events where I go, is the Daddy Boss way, right? And I created Daddy Boss as a platform to empower fathers. Empower fathers just like me, like I used to be. Like I used to believe that life had to be in a certain way, money was hard to come by and all that stuff. Building a business, you need a lot of money, knowledge, people, and just for the wealthy and lucky. And I created Daddy Boss just to help fathers like I used to be, by sharing with them how to empower them, how to show them a different way of achieving financial independence, to achieve time freedom, to achieve good health, to achieve a better lifestyle without having to go through all the hurdles that I have gone through, and some of them were quite painful. And the Daddy Boss way, which is pretty much a system, if you like, right, is just by using advanced rental strategies from properties even before you acquire them. Advanced rental strategies to generate substantial amounts of cash flow, much higher than most can achieve in any country, whether it's in the United Kingdom, in the US, mainland Europe, Germany, France, Italy, or if you're looking at Far East, all the way down to Australia, South America, and even Africa. Middle East, also one. There are ways to use advanced rent strategies to generate substantial amounts of cash flow that's much higher than most people will ever know, and also gain the flexibility there. And the advantage of that is, instead of having to work so hard with post-tax money and then save, get an asset to then generate small amounts of cash flow, which is going to be very hard to scale, the Daddy Boss system, as I call it, it's a much more advanced way of doing that, which is going to fast track the progress and the growth, and therefore helping fathers to take more control of their lives, whether it's financial, relationships, health, and of course wealth and well-being, both mental health and physical health, so they can fast track the process, generate more cash flow, control more assets so they can build equity faster, cash flow faster, and all of that without having to work so hard and utilize money, utilize post-tax money, okay? Now, I'll give a little bit of an explanation of post-tax money and pre-tax money. So for example, if you don't have a property company, for example, a property business that is set up on a limited company structure or limited liability company, wherever you are in the world, some countries are going to use limited companies, some countries are going to use limited liability companies, limited partnership, whatever there is. But we're looking at business structures. The advantage of the business structures for kind of scalability is this, that you are not relying on a wage to build wealth. So a wage means you work for somebody else and then you have post-tax money. So you work hard and you make, let's say, £2,000 or $2,000, and then you have your deductions, which is tax, national insurance, wherever you are in the world, different taxes there, and then you're going to have the post-tax money. And then you're going to utilize the post-tax money to invest and generate some returns. Now, when you use limited company structures or limited liability partnerships, or whichever there is, company structures, right, business structures, you utilize a lot of pre-tax money. So instead of going paying a bunch of tax on the income that the company generates, you can actually utilize those funds before paying tax to then invest in other areas, so you leverage it. Okay, I'll give an example. Imagine if you have an iPhone like I do, an iPhone, I think, let's say if it costs around 1,000, I don't know, 500 pounds or euros or dollars. If you work for a wage to buy that phone, you most likely will have to earn far more than the 1,500, 1,200, whatever the phone costs. And the reason is you have to earn more, you pay your taxes, and then you go, after the deductions, you take the funds, which is saved money, and then you go and buy a phone. Now, when you utilize company structures, you buy the same phone with the same amount of income that the business has generated. For example, if the phone costs 1,500, the company, the business will generate 1,500 in income, and then you buy the phone for 1,500. Whereas if you work for a wage, you're probably going to have to earn 2,500 or 3,000, depending on your earnings and your tax deductions, to then be left with the 1,500 to then go and buy a phone. So a lot of structures there's a lot of advantages of using advanced ways of not just generating cash flow, but also advanced ways of retaining money and keeping money within you so you can go and reinvest, so you can scale up, okay? So just be very careful there with the financial trap of buying first house. I know a lot of people have this belief, oh, I need to work and buy my house, buy my own house. First of all, if the property is not fully paid, you don't own it. The bank still owns it. You just pay a mortgage, which is pretty much the right to occupy the asset, but it's not yours. It's the bank's money. Now, if you're going to have, for example, let's say if you're going to invest, or if you're going to put a deposit of 100,000, whether it's British pounds, US dollars, euros, or whatever the currency, instead of parking 100,000 into a place that's going to become a liability for you, right? What you can do is to utilize the same 100,000 through some advanced strategies that we do through the Daddy Boss system, and you can perhaps end up controlling up to about 10 properties with the same 100, right? That's right. The numbers are right. You can utilize the same 100,000 instead of buying one or putting a deposit in one for you to live in, which is going to become a liability, not an asset. You can then utilize the same 100,000 and potentially control up to about 10 properties. And each of those properties will generate cash flow and the equity for you. So instead of parking that amount of cash into one place, which is not going to generate much cash, if any at all, because you own a home, and perhaps a little bit of equity in there, but you can't really do anything with the equity because you're going to be living in the house, so it's kind of like limited in there. You can utilize the same amount of capital, let's say 100, and control up to 10 properties, and each of them generating a few thousand of net profit because of a strategic way of doing that. And then you just do the math, right? Let's say if you have 10 properties generating 2,000 a month, you then have what? You've got a good number there. So you're talking about 20,000 of net cash profit every single month instead of none, right? I hope this is making sense. It's a little bit advanced for most people, but that's literally pretty much how I do it. And of course, you still have the equity on top of that, so you still build the wealth along those lines. Okay, so I hope it makes sense what I shared here, but just be mindful of that. And the key I would like, one of the perhaps giveaway I'd like to leave you with here today when you're watching these videos, is start questioning the beliefs that you were taught to be true from childhood when it comes to money, when it comes to wealth creation, when it comes to generating cash flow, when it comes to working for somebody else, when it comes to building a life in your terms. Because it's a lot simpler than I have been taught when I was a child, growing up in Brazil, a loving family, but a lot of limiting beliefs about what's possible. And it's a lot simpler and is actually really, really enjoyable. And you get to a certain level, just like us entrepreneurs do, right? We think about how do we create value? How do we create value to the marketplace? And the returns that we have financially is in direct proportion with the value we create to the marketplace. Financial returns are in direct proportion to the value we create to the marketplace. If you want more returns or more money, create more value, reach more people, create more value to more families, more individuals around the world. And that's how we do it. And property is just a vehicle, like any other business or any other class of investments. It's just a vehicle. So utilize property as a vehicle to create value for others and therefore for yourself. I hope you found value in this video, and always, always, always challenge the status quo. Always question, how can I do this better? Why things need to be done in the way that I have been taught needs to be done, okay? And always question these things, because if you don't, your results are just going to be in line with those around you. And your results are always going to be in line with those of your thinking. But once we start changing the way we think, just like I have explained about cash flow and equity from assets that you don't even own or even before you buy them, right? Once you become aware of something else, once you become aware of how to do things in a certain way, then you're going to act in a certain way, and then your results are going to change. It's actually very, very simple. So I hope you found value in it, and keep pushing forward, keep moving forward, and always challenge the status quo.